Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Keep Your Buyer in Focus, 5 Key Pitfalls to Avoid in Enterprise Class ABM. I'm Sal Osoro, publisher at the Management Report, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. As you'll see, all of our Twitter handles are right here on your screen, and we welcome everyone to connect and share your thoughts and feedback on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag BII20. You are able to tweet directly from the On24 platform here using the Twitter widget on your screen. And lastly, if you haven't done so already, please join more than 70,000 of your peers and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. You can sign up for the free subscription at themanagementreport.com today. For today's presentation, we are using the On24 platform, and during the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the platform toolbar. As I mentioned earlier, you can tweet directly within the platform using the Twitter widget that's on the left-hand side of the screen. We also encourage you to ask our presenter questions, and to do so, simply click on the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. You can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A widget, so please don't wait to the end. Today's presentation is slated to run about 25 to 35 minutes, with about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A following the session. The session is being recorded for those of you who are going to ask, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with your colleagues. We also welcome you to let us know how we're doing so we can continue to improve the level of content we provide you. Please take our quick survey that will automatically launch once the webinar session ends. If you can't wait, you can pull it up at any time to complete the survey by clicking on the survey icon circled here at the bottom of your screen. But again, before signing off today, please take a moment to complete the quick questionnaire. Alrighty, now that that's all behind us, I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Pierre Cousteau. In his role as Senior Vice President of Product, Pierre leads the strategy and development of MRP Prolitics, the only enterprise-class predictive ABM platform. His team of product managers, data scientists, designers, and engineers are responsible for building the industry's leading suite of products designed to enable marketers and salespeople to achieve higher response rates, pipeline conversion, and revenue value through the use of data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and highly usable application interfaces. Prior to joining MRP, Pierre led global product management over the leading enterprise-class marketing automation platform, Oracle Eloqua. For more than 20 years, his focus has been to identify business needs and translate those to client value, serving product engineering and consulting roles in companies like Oracle, Aptean, and Infor. In his spare time, Pierre enjoys mentoring others, composing music, and being out on the water, which with a name like Cousteau, I guess that's par for the course, right, Pierre? Pierre, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to pass things over to you to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Sal, and thank you so much to the Management Report for allowing us to engage your audience here and to hopefully get this to be the start of great conversations around a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, ABM, especially as it pertains to the enterprise. So before we begin, if I say enterprise, you say, well, probably not that enterprise, right? Although we will try to boldly go where no marketer has gone before. And essentially, let's define what we mean by enterprise and enterprise ABM. And, let's define it a little bit. Enterprise class, what does that mean? It might mean that you're in big, shiny buildings, or that your company has very large revenue or is growing rapidly, but usually that's not what we mean by enterprise. The traits that define an enterprise for us, as we define it, is a company whereby there's multiple product lines, probably multiple geographies, and supported language. So a company that operates at the global level with some areas of specialization as it pertains to its product and services. It's usually result focused. Usually those companies are working towards multiple outcomes, not just leads. So they might have a big number of existing customers, and they're really looking for things such as cross-selling, upselling, retaining large customers, getting repeat business from them. And obviously, since a lot of those companies have created those specializations through acquisitions or growing inorganically, they'll sometimes and very often have multiple system of records. There's a certain level of autonomy within different areas of the business where people might be using different CRMs or different marketing automation platforms or different websites. And what about the buyer? Is the buyer, that's being targeted by enterprise, ABM marketers any different? Well, the difference is they shouldn't be, but oftentimes they are. Oftentimes, a company that is targeting, stakeholders over multiple product lines will see multiple buyer personas. So not only are you targeting maybe the CIO and their team, you might be also targeting the head of HR with a different product set, or the head of marketing, with marketing products. So you have people with different job titles and responsibilities within those accounts that, depending on what product or what outcome you're looking for, you will be targeting. So multiple product lines actually may engage also with the same buyer, right? So the same buyer might be targeted by two different product lines, or a product line in the service organization, and again, they might be doing that through a variety of channels. So what that results in, oftentimes for this poor buyer, is they see, a choir of discordant voices. They see your company as many different little companies within it. So the whole benefit of working with a single organization, in terms of convenience and in terms of, you being known as a buyer from that company, is lost because multiple stakeholders within that enterprise are actually trying to get your attention. So without further ado, let's talk about the 5 key pitfalls to avoid. In the words of a great politician from Canada, where I'm located right now, he said, we're on the edge of the precipice. Let's take a step forward, and let's dive in and look at those 5 key pitfalls. So before we had social distancing, which we're all familiar with now, it's a new term that I first heard in March. I can remember clearly the first time I heard it in early March. We had corporate distancing, and you've all seen it, all the silos that exist within larger companies. So as companies grow and evolve, people have a need to manage their own budget or to specialize, create their own teams and specialize them around a particular area of the business. And what that oftentimes creates is some sort of distanciation or dissociation, where people are not really willing or incentivized to talk to one another and collaborate. What this means to your buyer, of course, is, again, a disconnected experience. So it's hard enough, for marketers in large organizations to even talk to everyone in marketing and all collaborate, between field marketing, between brand, between demand gen, et cetera, and all the different service. And oftentimes, various channels have their own people. There's the digital folks, there's the social folks, and again, it's hard enough to coordinate. Now, multiply that by multiple departments, multiple, different business units within an enterprise, and you can see how very, very quickly your poor buyer could disengage by virtue of the fact that you're not all speaking from one voice. So let's look at the things we could ask ourselves as we look at various platforms, various technology platforms that really should be an enabler here to work against that corporate distancing, but oftentimes they don't. And the reason being, and we'll talk about this through this presentation, a lot of the ABM platforms are treated, or at least positioned, as just another channel in one division of the company trying to do ABM. So here's a few questions to ask yourself. Can multiple groups and product lines and geographies share on the buyer insights? So in other words, as you gather data through your engagement with companies, is that data even shared with, within even your team, then as it extends to other teams within the organization? And secondly, you have tools that can provide a good flow of actionable insights to both marketers and salespeople. As I'm sure you've heard by now, ABM is all about, sales and marketing collaboration. That's one of the basic tenets of ABM. But unfortunately, a lot of data is shared. But is that insight? And if you give a salesperson, if you're a marketer and you give a salesperson data, and it's not actionable, or you don't give them some context as to how it should be used in their job, to get to the outcomes that they're looking for, that data might actually be counterproductive. So you need to make sure that the tools that you use provide actionable insights that can be shared, not only with with salespeople if you're a marketer, but also with the other departments within the organization. Then to not run the risk of over communicating or communicating badly and sending conflicting information to your buyers, do you have any guardrails in place that says, hey, this particular person is being engaged and is deemed, for instance, at this buying stage with this product line, now is not a good time to engage them in a communication about another product or another solution within the company. Let's wait. Let's have guardrails in place that make it so that we don't over communicate or just confuse the heck out of that poor buyer with conflicting messaging. And then, there's this added complexity that oftentimes we don't talk about, but enterprise companies also tend to do business indirectly in B2B, right? They tend to have channel partners or distributors, be it because, certain regions or market segments that they don't want to service themselves. But are we allowing our partners to also share into the benefit of our ABM strategy? Are we sharing any insights with them? Are we prescribing the right action? Are we helping them to target the right accounts? And really, that's a lost opportunity that we see with so many companies right now where they're great at doing their ABM strategy, executing them by themselves, but not really leveraging their channel in the most optimized way. Second pitfall, failure to execute insights at the speed of buyer engagement. So in my job over the years, I've talked to many CMOs, I've talked to many organizations, and a lot of them, have made quite a lot of progress when it comes to their data. So all of the engagement that we're having with customers over digital media and also over offline, channels is creating massive amounts of data. That data should really be seen as cues that your buyer is giving you as to where they're at in the in the cycle, how much interest they have for your product, or maybe your competitor's product, even through intent data. And I see a lot of people making progress and building big, customer data platforms or big data warehouses where they're analyzing all of that data. But unfortunately, most of them do so in a very slow manner. In other words, it takes about a month to assemble all the data together and derive some insight out of it. So by the time you've derived that insight, your buyer's moved on. They're next to the next. They're out to the next step of their journey. And any action you take at the macro level won't be efficient. You need to take action in the moment. So we're talking about minutes here, not days. And anything that is longer than 24 hours in terms of insights that you've gathered from the buyer is probably too long. It's probably stale and not really that relevant at that point. So really you need to tune your insight engine, where you take insights from the engagement that you're having with your customer to be as real time as possible. So you don't waste resources, you don't waste time, and you really engage the customers and the buyers on their own terms and not yours. So again, here's a few questions you should ask yourself in keeping up with your buyer. Ask yourself, are we monitoring for and proactively reacting to interesting moments in the buyer journey? Again, your buyer is giving you cues, be it with engagement on your website or even on the phone over with one of their business development representative or through direct mail or any other channel. They're sending out cues about their interest, where they're at in the buying journey. Are you doing anything about those cues? Really, the good tools that, the best tools that you can use are those that will allow you to not only surface those interesting moments, but also prescribe, what to do next. What's the right message? What's the right step to take towards, engaging that customer even further down the consideration stages. So how often are you running predictive models, if at all? If you're running predictive models to try and see a buyer's propensity to engage or to convert, how often are you doing that? And is it based on data from today, yesterday, or a month ago? Chances are, if it's from a month ago, it's not really that relevant anymore. So you need to make sure, again, that as you establish tools to run predictive models, that these run if not every day, at least, if not every hour, at least once a day. But the optimal time would be even faster than that. And speaking of predictive models, what kind of machine learning is used, or AI, in optimizing the delivery? The delivery of the content, not only the nature of the content, but the time of day. There might be an optimal time of day, rather, to contact people based on past interactions, be it on the phone or over email. What's the cadence and the right speed for various engagement tactics? What's the right frequency of display advertising that's going to yield the best results? So you're trying to optimize against many different variables and many different factors. And again, technology is there to do that today. You just need to make sure that you leverage it correctly. Pitfall number 3. There's often a lot of confusion between multi-channel and omni-channel. So I'm going to try to define what we mean by omni-channel, but essentially the fact that you communicate with customers over a multiple channel is great. It has a lot of merits. And so there's a lot of ways to engage buyers. We're going through one today where we're delivering a webinar. That's one. There's all sorts of digital and non-digital ways to engage with your buyers, of course. So again, I go back to the cues that are being given out by customers. How do you make sure that you communicate on the channel that's proper at that time, based on more than anything, your customer's propensity to engage within that channel and their desire to do so. So when you communicate incorrectly over one channel, which we've all seen, people over communicating or communicating the wrong message over just email or just display advertising, one channel is spam. If you do it across multiple channels, that becomes harassment. We've all been on the receiving end of that, where we see things that are not relevant to us over and over again over display advertising, and to add insult to injury, at some point they start to email you, and then they start to invite you to events and whatnot, but it's not relevant to either your job role or where you're at in the customer journey, and it becomes harassment, and we tune out. So you need to make sure that you avoid those pitfalls as well. So in finding the many roads to your customer's heart, a few questions to ask yourself. Firstly, and this is perhaps the most underused opportunity, people don't really treat salespeople interaction as a channel. And what I mean by that, when you treat it as a channel, it means that it needs to be informed by data, right? The message, the timing of the interaction, the nature of it needs to be informed by your data just as much as any digital engagement. And it's possible to do so. But not only that, you need to get the cues back. You need to get the information back from the interactions with that channel as well. So what are you doing to take the outcome of those calls or those interactions from salespeople and using that to inform your not only your overall strategy and overall tactics, but also the delivery of the next interaction you're going to be having with that buyer or prospective buyer. How do we optimize the delivery of the right message at the right time? It's very common. People use marketing automation providers and platforms to orchestrate the delivery of emails. I certainly have seen my fair share of this with Eloqua customers, and those tools are great, but what they oftentimes fail to acknowledge is what's going on in other channels as well. So is email really the right channel at this time? And very few marketing automation platforms are natively integrated to answer that question. And lastly, can we see the interactions whereby engagement within one channel can influence, simplify, or amplify engagement within another? So for instance, you're running a display campaign. How is that helping perhaps drive people to higher response rates to direct mail, or vice versa? Or how is it that your direct mail influences the conversion rates of your outbound calls by your UBDRs? And how does it result in better appointment, which in turn result in higher conversion rates? So very oftentimes, and this is the nature of running various tactics in silos, they're each done and performed with different tools that are not connected. So it's really, really hard to know and get the real intelligence from interacting with customers across multiple channels, just simply because those tools are disconnected. Data. So everyone gets data, as the opera would say. So I'll spare you the sickening statistics on how much data the modern marketer has to contend with and how it's constantly growing. I'm sure you've seen those statistics, but it would just be another piece of data that you don't get to use. So I'm personally very adamant about the fact that I don't think marketers should really be data driven. We've been hearing quite a lot of that over the last few years, but I think this is not something that marketers wholeheartedly subscribe to. No one aspires to be a data expert. People want insights, and marketers are really creative people oftentimes that just want the right insight to figure out what's the next best action, best tactics, and figure out how to improve their engagement with customers. So really, when it comes to data, what people will be interested in is things that allow them to at least understand the quality of it and take actions, right? So think of it as a health check on your data to say, how healthy is my data, and what kind of additional hygiene or lifestyle habits should I need to take with regards to my data to actually make it better. And oftentimes, most of the platforms out there are meant to really take pristine data and turn it into something. There's no such thing as pristine data, so you have to have the tools that allow you to normalize your data, actually make it more usable, increase the quality of it over time. And again, you need to look for platforms that allow you to do that. So if data's got you overwhelmed, ask yourself, firstly, have we connected all the proper sources of data to our ABM solution? This is a very common pitfall, as I stated earlier, with those silos and those point solutions that people are using. Oftentimes the data doesn't even get to make it to a system of record or a system of engagement like an ABM solution. So make sure that you do leverage all the connectors that some of those ABM platforms will provide, and make sure they have the connections and the way to actually bring in that data in a way that will make sense to you. Very oftentimes we see vendors offering ABM solutions that rely on their own data, their own representations of what accounts are and whatnot. You need to make sure that you can still retain your representation of your data, leverage that fully, understand it, and make sense of it as well. At the end of the day, ABM solutions need to be enablers in normalizing and getting insight out of your data. Some are not. Some will take whatever you give them, and that's the result you'll get. Even worse, some make the engagement data that they generate actually misleading or confusing, and it's really hard to get that data out of there, to get it into a system of insights and a system of analytics to actually make sense of it. So make sure that connectivity is there, but also that it's really an enabler, and it's really built into the solution. Data quality and data hygiene is built into the solution. And finally, do we have the tools to even measure and assess the overall health of our data? And are any of those tools able to make some recommendations? In other words, if you're trying to, for instance, do account matching, and you're uploading a whole bunch of accounts from your CRM system to an ABM platform, is it telling you, hey, if only we had this other data point, or only if you normalize this, we'd get better results. And this is the state of your data as it stands. So a lot of point solutions, again, oversee this as someone else's problem. It's not. It's really fundamental to your ABM strategy that you get to practice good data hygiene without it being overly complicated. And lastly, the last pitfall, and I'm sure everyone's heard about this one, vanity measurements, not real results. It's really easy in enterprise to bask yourself in some phenomenally large numbers, right? In the enterprise, you might see millions of hits on your website per month. We see that from a lot of our customers where they get millions of visits to their website. people engaging with content at great scale, seeing, very large email lists with great click-through results and whatnot. But how does that really translate into business value? How does that really address the fundamental goals of ABMs, which should be to, increase pipeline conversion and ultimately increase revenue, accelerate that pipeline, retain more customers? The fundamentals of ABM are oftentimes overlooked or at least blurred by, what's called vanity measurements. And a lot of those ABM tools, since they don't have the ability to really give you anything that resembles, real outcomes, will very oftentimes reward you with vanity metrics that really can't, might be a fair proxy at time for real results, but don't really give you the great picture that it should be. So again, in the enterprise, this is particularly acute because you're having to defend, greater budgets, and oftentimes, as I said, the KPIs and metrics, the numbers are big, so it really hides, some of the flaws and some of the shortcomings that you might be having in your approach. So in measuring up, ask yourself, well, firstly, you're in the enterprise, so you've got a great opportunity here to benchmark yourself. If there's multiple divisions or multiple geographies, multiple business units within your company, this is a perfect opportunity to start benchmarking your tactics across the business units. For instance, I worked with this large equipment manufacturer where the biggest doubter of an ABM strategy was this particular product division that said, we know our customers already, we know them well, we engage them well, we know exactly where the deals are, we're on top of this. And then as it turns out, as multiple business units benchmark themselves, the biggest doubters actually had the greatest results. And that became a source of great curiosity and pride, but also informed a lot of things that, all the marketers across the company needed to take notice of. So don't be afraid to benchmark yourself. You've got a pretty unique opportunity here. It's a lot harder to benchmark yourself against your competitor, but within the same enterprise, it's really at your fingertips. Then you need to ask yourself, what story is the KPI telling? Is that a story that that I could really go to my CFO and defend, or better yet, just give the numbers to someone and say, go defend this, and go defend how much we're contributing to revenue using those numbers. I can guarantee you that once you look at your numbers that way, saying, hey, would I let someone who's not within our department go and defend these for me? You'll take a harder look and say, well, I probably need some better numbers than any vanity metrics. But lastly, perhaps more importantly, measurements are about giving you actionable things to improve upon, right? And you could always benchmark yourself against yourself and say, hey, we need to improve this particular KPI, and people should definitely do that. But then if you look at the entirety of your tactics, if you look at the customer journey across all of those and focus on the right things, you should really have actionable things to do. To say, hey, when we see this type of customer, this is really the best, type of engagement that we can create for them, and let's try that. Let's experiment. Let's have the curiosity to say, how does this affect, my outcomes here? Does that accelerate my pipeline? Do we get greater deals if we do this? So again, focusing on those things should really give you the actionable insight to improve over time. So to wrap this up, it's clear that you might ask, why does this matter? And why does this matter in the enterprise? Well, enterprise or not, ABM is more than just marketing. It's really just great marketing. There's a few analysts there that said, ultimately, we might stop even talking about ABM because it's just good B2B marketing, and everyone should be doing it. Again, it poses some very unique challenges in the enterprise, and unfortunately, more often than not, what we notice when we talk to some of our customers, before they join us, those point tactics that are being experimented with ABM tools across the enterprise actually took them further away from the objectives of ABM because it just became another channel and it just created more noise and more distractions. But really, ABM run correctly within the enterprise, as you can see here, should be about delivering higher ROI, more money, more results for your marketing dollars. And Demand Metric has measured this with, several organizations where they're seeing, from 10% to up to 30% of improvement in ROI with companies that actually run ABM tactics correctly. It clearly outperforms campaign-based marketing. Again, it's all predicated on not just surrounding the account with the right messaging. I don't think surrounding the account with the right messaging in the enterprise really works if you're doing it in silos. It's really based upon implementing ABM strategies cohesively across the enterprise, and it's proven to outperform your classic marketing tactics. But lastly, it's aligning sales and marketing, but it's about the customer. It's really about the customer and engaging with them on their own terms. So all of that insight that you're gathering about those companies, because you're more focused on the right companies. It's really hard to focus on every company on the planet. You have to focus on the right companies, the ones that have, the propensity not only to buy your product, but to buy it from you, the ones that, you have a shot at engaging with. And then once you align the rest of the organization behind that, you will see results because of that increased focus and where you're putting your resources essentially in the right places. So at MRP, we strongly believe in enterprise class ABM being absolutely omni-channel. What you're seeing here is really the product vision for MRP Prolitics. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But why omni-channel or multi-channel? It's essentially because we don't think that ABM can be run in a silo. We think it can actually be counterproductive for the enterprise. Might work very well, ABM and point solution tools might work very well if you're a startup, you don't have any customers in your CRM. But again, enterprises already have a lot of knowledge about their customers, and they need to leverage all of that data, years of exhaustive digital data on those customers and those existing customers that they want to start leveraging to really focus in on what's important. Let me tell you a small personal story here. But I joined this company, a very large software company with a red logo, where that company has pretty much all the top customers in the world. They already have sold something to. So I was acquired. I was in a company that was acquired by them. And when we looked at their CRM, all of the accounts, that were target markets, we had, the company had already sold to. So you'd think, oh, well, this is great. We've already got all the contacts. But it turns out, as we started looking at the data, that, very few of those companies we'd ever sold to our target buyer. So our target buyer wasn't in their database. So we needed to take action on that. So again, what did we do? We looked at the data that we had, years and years of data about those companies, identified where we needed to spend money to go and acquire the right to engage with those buyers, where we might already have a connection to the buyer, where we might have a product that was a good wedge in the door to sell this additional product. So years of insights in the data that, ultimately allowed us to really focus in our efforts on the right companies. So this is very typical of enterprise class. So what do you need? You need superior data ingestion, connectivity, and management. And then you need to feed that into artificial intelligence, organize the data, derive insights, optimize actions, and attribute results. So AI is not simply about data. It can be, right? You need to use AI and ML to really make sense of data, derive the right insights. But then how do you use AI and ML to optimize the actions that you're going to be taking, to really get results? And how you use that to attribute those results back and make sense of the data again. And you need to deliver all that, of course, within a modern and engaging user experience that will encourage curiosity from marketing and salespeople, and that will encourage them to experiment and reach excellence. So this is a visual depicting the enterprise class ABM capabilities that MRP Prelytics has been delivering to a lot of our customers. And it all starts with data and goes to using the judicious use of predictive insights and then optimizing for the right action. So let's talk about that continuum of data to insights to action. These are really the building blocks of the capabilities to required with the right omni-channel enterprise class predictive ABM solution. We'll come back to this image in a moment, but let me walk you through a few points here. So data. So oftentimes, it's not only about collecting and connecting to the data, it's also making sense of it. Data within the enterprise, as I said earlier, it's abundant. There's a lot of it. It could be hidden somewhere, though, that you don't have access to or you don't have rapid access to. So it's really important for an ABM solution to have the right connectors and the right way to ingest that data very rapidly. Be it your first-party data that oftentimes is sitting hidden in a CRM system, in your marketing automation, or in a data lake, but it could also be your web data. All the visits from your accounts to your website, their engagement with various pieces of content on your website. You want to make sure you can leverage that as well. And then, that could be augmented with second-party contact, contact and company information, firmographics, technographics, and things of that effect. What does a customer own? What type of solutions have they purchased in the past? Who was on the buying committee, et cetera, et cetera. And then, third-party intent data, which Prelytics, we have our own proprietary intent data that looks at essentially what people are interested in, what content is being consumed over the internet, and so on and so forth. But there's all sorts of other source of intent data that our customers can actually use. Any predictive analytics. Customers might have already a department that's responsible for running some data analytics on their own. How could that be brought into a platform as well? And so on and so forth, and all the different data signals that come from engagement over online and offline channels. And then you need a platform that can actually derive some insights out of that. So intent on its own is not oftentimes the answer. Intent is just one piece of the puzzle. Then first-party data on its own is also not the answer. You really need something that allows you to layer all these different sources of data together, and again, using some sort of intelligence to really rapidly surface some interesting points, some interesting facts, some interesting moments in the customer journey, and make sense of that. And lastly, how do you communicate with customers and make sure that you do this cohesively across multiple channels, be it online channels such as display advertising, content syndication, email, and so on and so forth, and then offline. Oftentimes, as I stated earlier, we don't really treat the sales people interaction as a channel when we really should. So how can we inform those conversations that salespeople have? How can we make sure that they actually contact the right person at the right time? And so there's two factors here. What's the content that we're serving up through those interactions, and what's the timing? What's the right cadence? What's the right channel? So there's multiple optimization points along the way in defining what the right actions are, with your buyers. The important thing is the platform here is meant to really augment the intelligence that already exists in some of those system of engagement. So for instance, you have a marketing automation platform today, such as Eloqua or Marketo or HubSpot, and you want to make sure that you leverage all the insights that you've derived from looking at all of your data so that, the action of those platforms is more focused and leads to better conversations and better engagement with your customers. So it's really an omni-channel strategy that requires some sort of connectivity, between all of these different platforms that support those channels. So just a word about MRP. MRP is the only enterprise-class predictive ABM platform. We've got 18 years of account-based sales and marketing expertise with 11 global offices, working programs in 20 languages. What this means, folks, is that we've got people with feet on the ground in multiple countries, and those people speak the language of our customers. They know They know the customs. They know how the buyers actually engage in all those various countries. They know the specifics of them, and we use that to improve essentially the campaigns that we run for our customers. MRP is really a mix. It's very unique in that it's a mix of technology solutions and services. So it's really an all-encompassing solution that helps our customers, drive better outcomes throughout the world. Our focus is really providing sales and marketing solutions for pipeline conversion, measurable revenue, and return to both demand and retention units at our client using that mix of services and enterprise-class predictive ABM platforms, that is MRP Prolitics. And again, those 18 years of experience running campaigns for our customers is put to good use in us creating better data, better intent data for our customers, and better software solutions. So it really has allowed us to create a very interesting place for us in the market. And that place has been recognized by the folks at Forrester. It's always great to get our customers to tell us great things about how we're helping them. But this was also recognized this year again, where MRP Prolitics was deemed a leader in the ABM platform category. And what's great about this is Forrester's also recognized our claim that we're the best fit for the large enterprise that are executing across multiple departments, business units, or partners, and the fact that we can be truly omni-channel because we've offered the most native and integrated engagement channels with the most comprehensive range of native functionality of any vendor. As I said, nothing makes us prouder, though, than hearing from our customer. So I wanted to walk you through a quick case study of an enterprise software vendor. This is an enterprise software vendor on the East Coast of the U.S., large enterprise software vendor that's been in business for quite several years, that has been transitioning from on-premise licenses to the cloud with its customers. So along with that comes a great deal of complexity and challenges, as you can imagine. When you've got a large install base and you're wanting to make sure that not only do you retain that install base as you change the technology platform and prevent them from going to your competitors, but really plan on using that as a vector for growth. So really, they came to us with the classic use case of better aligning sales and marketing around both those existing customers and their total addressable market. And their goals were really to cross-sell and upsell in a vastly complex environment, again, with multiple business units, multiple software solutions, really to try and understand, what are the needs of our target accounts? What's the right timing? How can we leverage AI to really figure out, how to approach those customers and what conversations we need to have? And it was really about, of course, aligning and improving the interactions and the collaboration between sales and marketing. So how they did that, essentially, a mix of topics and intent from our proprietary intent signals to really try and understand, what topics were top of mind for their buyers, and also, if they were looking at their competitor's product, if they were doing any research on competitive product, that's a clear signal that you need to take immediate action, right? So, and those actions could be multiple things. Could be trying to improve your share of voice. Could be trying to have the right conversations, and they could be those tactics could be elaborated through a variety of channels. In this case, we were using email advertising, direct mail, pre-sales, essentially BDRs, and the website. And what's great is because all of those things that I just mentioned, all of those tactics are connected through the Prolitics platform, you have the ability, this very unique ability to see for every company the exact level of engagement, essentially the time series of every engagement that they've had with your website, for instance. You have the ability to track, hey, how is my advertising impacting the share of voice or the visits to my website, and how's that, helping drive higher conversion rates when it comes to email campaigns or direct mail or even getting them to simply acknowledge taking a phone call or booking an appointment. What's really unique about using machine learning and the way that we use it is we allow our customers to really try and track for their own outcomes. So again, it's not just about propensity to buy or propensity to convert or propensity to engage. In this case, we really wanted to evaluate existing account data to recommend the right channels. What's the right channel to engage this customer with, this particular customer versus that other? What's the content? What's the timing of that? So again, we could learn quite a lot from existing data, and as customers kept engaging, we're using that data and having the machine learning actually adapt and make better predictions on what attributes constituted a good attribute to choose this version of the collateral versus that one, or this version of a creative versus that one rather. And finally, every customer needs to track where they're at, and you need to really try and model the buyer journey and see where you might have, leakage in your waterfall. So in the classic waterfall style, we allow our customers to really track, how many customers, how many buyers are at each stage at any point in time, because this is very dynamic and it's not linear. Conventional wisdom would have you think that people go from one stage to the other in order. They don't. Oftentimes they skip one, or they leave altogether. So how can we use, again, intent, all the data that we have, predictive capabilities, to really assign people to the right buying stages, and in turn deliver them the message that is relevant at that point of the journey. So in summary, I invite you to use this roadmap to evaluate your current ABM capabilities in light of the very specific needs of the enterprise, and ask yourself, the few questions around your data, around how you engage, how you use ML to actually optimize that, and so on and so forth. So in the interest of time, we'll go to questions now.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Pierre. That was a fantastic presentation. It was very insightful and some great takeaways. The folks out there had a bunch of questions. Before we get to those, I'd like to remind everyone once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. You can either click on the survey icon now or wait for the survey to automatically launch when the session ends. And just a quick heads up to everyone, we will get to as many questions as we can now, but if we don't get to your questions, don't worry. We'll be able to email you with any questions afterwards. So, all right, Pierre, let's get to those questions. The first one came from Mary. She's asking, so how do I determine if my company falls within the categorization of an enterprise in need of enterprise class ABM?
Well, jokingly, I would say if you have colleagues in marketing that you've never met, chances are you're in the enterprise. More seriously, oftentimes enterprises, as I said earlier, they drive towards specialization, right? There's special groups with their own, their own purview and oftentimes their own tools, and that's a clear sign, that you might be in an enterprise. The other thing is you're probably already operating across multiple channels. So if you have, for instance, two different teams that are doing social media, because one is for one product and one for the other, and they're not really talking to your email team, or they're not talking to the digital team, you're starting to show the traits of an enterprise. So those are really good signs to look for. And finally, if you find that ABM is being used and an ABM tool is being used within only one department and not yours, before you ask yourself, should we just adopt that tool? Ask yourself if really it's going to help, and if you're really within. It's a sure trait again that you're in an enterprise because someone's doing something completely in the silo, right?
Right. That makes sense. All right. The next question, I guess, is David. He says he agrees that data is fundamental, but he says, but for most companies, including his own, there are huge data gaps. How would you have us start? Yeah,
this is so true. And even if you have a CRM today in a marketing automation, either the representation of companies or accounts might not be appropriate there, or your marketing automation platform may really be contacts-based and not really do a great job at telling you insights about companies. But there's there are some quick wins. I mean, the last thing I would want you to do is wait for the data to be perfect, right? It's never going to be. And if you embark on a journey to say, oh, let's clean up all of our data first, normalize it all before we do anything, those are years that you'll be losing, essentially, and you're not going to be doing anything. So I'd say find any insight you have, that could be corroborated somehow with some of the data that you have. So it might be that you have a discussion with sales, and it's like within your own business unit, and say, what are the most important accounts that we need to focus on, and then let's try to find data that corroborates what we're hearing. But then experimentation is a great tool to get data, right? Do something, get data out of it, use that data to inform, start informing your strategy a little bit. So engaging is oftentimes the shortest path to getting more data and better data, if you do it right. So don't be afraid to just jump and get started here.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense as well. All right, I think in the interest of time, we'll have one more. This is from Linda. She asks, what channels are best for enterprise ABM programs?
What's interesting here, that's a very common request. What channel should I be focusing on? And a lot of people will give you a clear answer here. I probably won't, because I think it all depends. It all depends on the channels they have already. But here's some hints as to what could inform your strategy as it comes to channels. If in looking at your CRM data, for instance, and you've identified 100 accounts, and of those 100 accounts, you look at the contacts you have in there, and you're like, I don't know if we've really engaged with those people, as much as we should. And maybe half of them, half of those accounts, we don't even have the right stakeholders, and the other half, we don't even have an email address to. Well, obviously, email is not a great channel. So you want to use something like display advertising. So I think, and tactics that will, or direct mail, the tactics that will quickly allow you to find, to gain the right to address that person, or those people within the buying committee, that ultimately you need to have your salespeople talk to. So really let the data and the use of existing channels that might already be in play inform your strategy here. Finally, another very important consideration, and don't ever underestimate the importance of that one, there's a right channel for the right stage of the journey, right? And contrary to common wisdom, there's ways to use the same channel differently at different stages of the journey. So, for instance, if I'll give you a very specific example, this company uses display advertising not only to feed the top of the funnel, to create awareness about their product, but once the buying committee is engaged, they found that, having messaging reassuring the prospective buyer about their services offering or their warranties, or like how they're going to be a good partner to this customer moving forward, having display advertising that extolled those virtues actually helped to accelerate the pipeline. So don't be afraid to really use channels in the way that you think are going to be helping, again, focus on the goals of driving better pipeline conversion, accelerating that pipeline, and getting to better outcomes. And I'm sure your data will, and your customer will actually tell you which channels are important.
Letting them choose their own journey, so to speak.
Exactly.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank Pierre again for such a great session, and thank all our attendees for taking the time out to join us today. Please do join us for the next session in the series, the 10 Timeless Marketing Rules to Attract Your Dream Customers, Create Superfans, and Run Laps Around Your Competitors. So thanks again, folks, for your time today. Enjoy the day.